I'm delighted to welcome Cullen Geiselman, who is the Conservation International board and member, and she's a new advisory board member for Bats Without Borders, and we're fantastically delighted to have her on board. And Cullen is going to be talking to us today about that eco-interaction database that she's been involved with. So thank you very much, Cullen. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning if you happen to be in the United States, where I am located in Texas. I'm thrilled to talk with you today about an ongoing project that I've been working on, and it's actually something that will never actually be complete in my mind. But I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, and let's see here, and we'll get started talking to you about a project and I hope a tool that folks can use. Sorry, I'm just getting my screen going the right way. All right, I hope you can all see my screen now. And I think there's still more people coming into the waiting room. And so, Rachel, I'll let you manage the waiting room, folks. Anyway, thrilled today to talk to you about something called Bat Eco Interactions. And so let me just jump in and tell you a little bit. First, it's going to be a little bit of storytelling about how we came up with this and how it continues to grow. And then ultimately, I'm going to walk you through this tool and how you might be able to use it. So when I was in graduate school at I was working with a botanist at the New York Botanical Garden and was able to work on a project called Seed Dispersal by Bats in the Neotropics. And this was originally going to be a paper. We compiled all the literature about what was known about bats that disperse seeds in the Neotropics. And it turned into a book. It was so big. And in order to keep up with all the literature, we created a literature database following, every interaction had its own little line between a bat and a plant for seed dispersal. And ultimately with my co-authors that you can see there on the right, Scott Morey and Tatiana Lobova from the New York Botanical Garden. And we produced this book. And Scott's great idea was, as we were working on it, let's put the database online at the New York Botanical Garden. And so this database was online. And my actual dissertation was about pollination. So I was focused on bat pollination. We started putting in information about pollination into the database, all focused on the Neotropics. And luckily, that information was also available online for folks to use. And we produced another publication called The Evolution of Bat Pollination, a Phylogenetic Perspective, with Ted Fleming and John Kress. And in this particular one, that's when we started gathering information from the old world. We thought, okay, well, bats are different in the old world and the new world. They're interacting some with similar plants and some not. And so that was pretty interesting. And so this database sat online and sort of stopped getting updated once these publications came out. And we were kind of wondering what to do with it. In the meantime, there was another group that was using our data in order to look at continent-wide networks between bats and plants and sort of trying to understand how these things are working. And just last year, after many, many years, the data from the database from 2010 was also the results from that were put together in another paper that was published called Insights into the Assembly Rules of Continent-Wide Multi-Layer Network, looking at these different relationships. And obviously, research continues. There's lots more going on between bats and plants out in the world and around the world. And so, like many projects, we had to rethink what we were going to do with this database. And my PhD advisor, Scott Morey, retired. I moved on. And we thought, well, let's take this database and let's do something. Let's not let it just die with the end of this project. What are we going to do? And how do we envision it? What would make the most sense to be most relevant to most people? And so we came up with a new vision. we wanted something obviously to stay online. We wanted to be open access, and we wanted the software to be open source as well, so that say the bird people want to take the software we're using and we've built to capture all the bat interactions with other organisms, they can use it too. And we wanted something that could be continuously updated, that wouldn't end when the grant funding ended for that particular project or someone moved on. We wanted something to continue, and something that would be editable, that we could continue to go back and correct, say, plant names as they change over time. And so that we could, as a community, we're working on it. And obviously we wanted to keep it bat focused, but maybe not just bat plant interactions, but interactions with other organisms. So all types of what we call eco interactions, which I'll discuss here in a moment. And in order to do that, we decided we needed to have very specific definitions of these interaction types. We got some criticism from our original database that we said any bat that visited a flower was pollinating it, and that's not actually true. Many bats visit flowers, take nectar and pollen, and don't actually perform the pollination service. Others are actually eating the flowers. So we decided we need to have very specific definitions for what these interactions are. Same with seed dispersal. When bats eat a fruit, doesn't necessarily mean they're moving the seeds. They might actually be just eating the fruit in place and not moving the seeds. Or there's some known seed predators that are bats that just chew up all the seeds and enjoy all that protein. And then as we were thinking about it, we've been, and I am a very tropics focused person, but there are a lot of bats that live in the temperate area and do a lot of other things. And so we decided this should be worldwide. And if we're gonna make it worldwide, we want it geographically referenced. And then ultimately for it to be community owned. So when the current folks working on it move on, go do other things, the community will own this. So it'll be a community resource and it'll be free. And so hence was born the Bat Eco Interactions. So, and this is, and so before I jump into anything else, what is a bat eco interaction? We are defining these things as an ecological interaction in which bat consumes, transports, pollinates, hosts, or roosts in part or all of another organism. And so we're all bat people here. We know bats do incredible things and are interacting. We find new ways that bats are interacting with other organisms all the time. It's really amazing what's out there. Let's capture this information. And so that's the purpose. What is now the Bat Eco Interactions database, available at www.batbase.org. And this is really to facilitate scientific research on bats and the ecosystem services they provide worldwide by gathering all the published peer-reviewed accounts of these interactions. So why publish and why peer-reviewed? And this comes from a botanist bent that, having worked with botanists at the New York Botanical Gardens, we find that a lot of bat biologists are actually not very good in just passing and identifying the plants that the bats are interacting with. But when they are forced to sit down and are focusing on publishing what they've learned, they have to go back and really work on identifying those organisms. And so we thought this is a good way to really make sure that these are good data that we're putting in our database. And then the other part that's really quite difficult is actually to keep these data current. And the idea that this is going to be a living database, it's not a one-time thing, we'll never have it all completed. So that is that's the thought. So what I like to do is take you through this kind of more of a little tutorial about how to use this thing. And it's an ever-growing database. Actually, the back end, the user interface continues to grow, and we continue to work on it. And so, this is, I thought this was going to be sort of an easy project, but it's taken many years and continues to unfold in ways that I could have never imagined. So let's go there. So this is the website at batbase.org, and you can mainly sign in, and at the end, I'll give my pitch for signing up. It's free. The only reason you sign up is so you can save your settings for your different searches and whatnot. So That's why we want you to sign up, and we want you to be part of this growing new community. So, so let me explain what's in the database in more visual terms. So in the database, we have information about the citation, where the data is coming from, and we have it by all authors in the database. We have the title, we have the journal, we have the year. We take not just journal articles and books, but also thesis and dissertations. Some of this really interesting information that actually never gets out into the larger community is very difficult for some people to find because they're locked up in university libraries. So all of that can be included. We also include for each interaction information about the location, the region of the world, the country, the habitat type. We follow IUCN habitat types and it hopes to standardize. And where available, we get the GPS information. In some cases, it's included in the article in the citation where the publication has given us the lat long. In other cases, in older articles, we have to go in and we zoom in and zoom in using Google Earth and find the location more or less and pull up that information ourselves. And then when possible, when given, we provide the elevation, because the bat interactions and what they're interacting with are vary greatly with elevation. So we think that'll be really useful information. And so then we have the actual bat that's part of the interaction. And then you can see a list of here of the different other organisms, the object organisms for which the bats would interact with. Now, because we started out as a bat plant database, most of the data in the database is actually focused on plants. And then a couple years ago, we started adding arthropods. The majority of bat species are insectivorous. So, so that we started working on that. And each of these interaction types, like I said before, are very specific. So bats interact with plants in many different ways. They consume parts of them, whether they're the flowers, leaves, seeds, or fruit. They roost in plants. Some are tent-making bats and use very specific plants in order to make their tent roost. Others roost in the cavities of trees. And so that's really interesting. Some just out in the foliage. Those are really interesting interactions for us to know. Of course, some visit flowers, whether for nectar or pollen or fleshy plant parts. And others are true pollinators, where the authors have actually shown that the bat is moving pollen from one conspecific to another. And then some are some provide seed dispersal, where we really find the bats are moving. They have either the seeds in their guts that they're moving, or actually large seeded fruits that they're moving. And then something else that has actually came to our attention based on a publication that is out there is that bats provide services to non-flowering plants, not to angiosperms, but to things like bryophytes. The bats can actually move bryophyte fragments around. And so we include that. And then with arthropods, we've been including bats are great predators of night-flying insects. But also some bats are prey to insects, that spiders are known to capture bats in the webs and eat them. Bats also provide a very interesting transport service to some arthropods, notable flower mites that actually hitch a ride on the nose of the bat as they move from flower to flower. And so this is very special transport service. It's been mainly seen in birds, but now they've actually recorded some in bats. And then bats are hosts to many ectoparasites that are also arthropods, so they can be hosts. And then some bats actually cohabitate with arthropods. In Central and South America, there's a bat species that lives almost exclusively in termite nests. It digs out a little hole and lives in the termite nest. So we thought that was really important information to capture as well. And now we're slowly expanding out to include interactions, and you can see the different types of interactions and the different groups that the bats would be interacting with, whether birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish, mammals. That's been really tricky on the back end of our database, since bats are mammals, how we build that out. And then fungi, obviously we know that bats are the host to fungus that is decimating many bats in North America. with white nose syndrome. So obviously being able to capture that information, as well as bacteria. There's a lot of new work on the microbiomes of bats and how do we capture that information here, and then other parasites. So a lot of these areas we don't have much data in. We're beginning to build out and capture that. So anyway, this is the type of data that is in the database that we continue to expand, and we're happy if you find some other type of interaction or some other type of organism that we should include, we will. Now, we don't currently include viruses because there are a number of other databases available online capturing that information, and so we didn't want to sort of reinvent the wheel there. Okay, so what are these uses? What would be useful for people to do with this database? Part of it is exactly what we did in the original database, is provide background information for future studies, and whatever it is, you go and search here, this is what's known, here's the list of the publications that we know about, here are the interactions that either help with a study that's already been conceived or help you conceive another study. Others are how like with the Mello et al. Paper that was published last year, how we can compare how bat assemblages are interacting with local flora between locations and across regions, and in that case, across continents. There's a way to look at that. There is a way to look at the diet breadth of bats. Obviously, there's certain bats that we find in South America that eat certain types of plants, but it's interesting. In certain areas in Central America, they don't. We're not totally sure why that is. Part of it might just have to do with the abundance of that particular plant in South America and lack of abundance in Central America. So, there's ways to use information there. And then also to show geographically, I'm going to show you some maps here in a moment, where studies have taken place, and also show you where others might be needed. There are a number of countries that we currently have no studies, and that might be those might be places where we should go and look, and could be potential to fill in our knowledge of bats. And then ultimately to act as this repository of ecological information for all bat species. So many things are lost in libraries, university libraries, and who knows if anyone will ever see them and find them again. And we would like to keep that information. It's very useful information, and keep it alive by having it in this database, and so people can see, oh, that's there, let me go find that publication. And isn't that interesting how that would help my research. Thanks to an introduction by Nancy Simmons to a group currently during the pandemic, they've taken the data that's in the database currently, and through using GLOBI, which is the Global Biological Interactions databases, pulling together all sorts of digital data out there, whether it be on virus or bats or whatever, and pulling all these different data sets together. They've actually gone this task force of various repositories of specimens around the world, and some other institutions, and pulled together what's out there. And so now that we have all this information about Post, the bat, from the various different museums, and then also, like I said, these databases of viruses, and then pulling this all together, combining the biological interactions unrelated to the host virus interaction, and see how these all come together. And so it's been really exciting to see this whole new different way of thinking about the database. And my little team, we've decided we better pivot a little and start adding some more information about rhinolophus and their interactions, given the current pandemic. So anyway, so there are a lot of different uses. So what's currently in the database? It's ever growing. We have over 10,000 interactions right now in the database. We have almost 8,000 associated with plants. That has a lot to do with our history. Almost 3,000 associated with arthropods, and again, some of these other new ones that we just built out the back end to start allowing for birds and bacteria and all of that. We're building that out. So far, 15 families of bats are represented from 135 genera. We have data from over 516 citations. We have, in many cases, the plant names have been corrected for synonymy. Again, that's my old, using tropicos.org. That's sort of my old botanical garden hat on. And over 9,000 of these interactions have GPS data associated with them, as best as we can do. So we're really excited. And you can see here where we've been working around the world. Again, you'll see there's a lot of data that's coming out of South America and Central America, because that's where the original database came out of, and the Caribbean islands. In North America, we have over 1,000 interactions, and those are mainly from Mexico, because that's part of North America. We have about 24 interactions from the United States. So if anyone's interested in looking at bringing together all those interactions, we would be happy to work with you. After we left looking a lot in Latin America, we jumped over to Africa, and we have over 1,000 interactions from Africa. Again, we're just tip of the iceberg here. And then went over into Asia and Oceania. I'm pulling up, we have about 2,000 from Asia, 1,100 from Oceania, and there are about 800, a little over 800 that are unspecific. These are from old publications that just mention the bat had interacted with another organism somewhere else, and it didn't specify the country or the habitat, but they've been included because this is some old time publication. One of my current volunteers is about to take on Europe. So from those of you in Europe, I'm sure she would love to get some information from you. That's probably, people have been studying bats in Europe longer than anywhere else. I think there's going to be a lot of information there. But you can see we only have about 100 interactions from Europe right now. So this is what it looks like when you go to the website and want to search the database. So I'm going to just take you through real quick how it works. It's just a real sort of a little tutorial, and to show you how this tool could be useful for you. So first you click on the database. It says Cullen at the top of this page because I've signed in as myself when I was creating these screenshots actually last year. So they're a little old. The data is a little old from these screenshots. But anyway, you click on database, and then you can click on this filter button, and then you can filter and group these interactions by various ways. You can group them by location, you can group them by source, meaning like the author, or by the taxon. And since we're taxon people on this call, let's look at the taxon area, and we're going to group interactions by taxon. When I took this screenshot last year, you could look at either bats, plants, or arthropods. So we're bat people, so let's look at bats. So then here I select bat, and then I just keyed in Hippocideridae. Let's see what's going on in that, what we know from that bat family. And we have over 200 interactions associated with that family. And then moving on, you can expand out the data, and this Hippocideridae is a bicolor. You can see what interactions we have there for that particular species. And you can see in each of the columns, you can see the object taxon. These are obviously families and orders of insects. We can say the bats are consuming these insects. We have the citation, we have the name of the author and the information. In this particular case, we didn't have habitat information, but we do have the name of the location. The country is Indonesia, et cetera, et cetera. So then you can sort more, and in this case, I wanted to look at habitat type. So just for the sake of showing you how this works, I chose caves and deserts. So this should pull up all the data that we have that are from habitats that are caves and deserts. And that gets us down to 55 interactions total there. And then say we want to look at these interactions on a map. So here we are, we can click that button up there, we can go to the map, and then you can see interactions that we have in the database for any species of Hippocideridae in deserts or in caves and subterranean habitat. So you can hover over these points, and they will show you what the interactions are and what the species is. And then you can also return to the table view And say you like that search, you're going to be doing a lot more work on Hypsidairidae and deserts and caves. And so you want to save that filter set, and you want to come back in 6 months and see what else is new. So you can save that filter set. You can also just download yourself the CSV file, a spreadsheet, and of all the data that's there. And that includes every single bit of data that I had shown you before, as whatever we know about the location, the GPS, the citation, all of it, all together. So you're able to do that. And so you're able to do a lot with this. So you can also look by location. Say you're not particularly interested in a particular taxon of bats or an organism, an object organism they're interacting with. You just really want to know what's going on in a particular location. So you can select the group by location, and you go in the filter area. And here I decided to filter by Argentina. Just it started with an A and was the top of the list. So filter by Argentina, and we have 39 interactions in the database from Argentina. And I can look at these on a map, and you can see where they are in Argentina. And then again, you can hover over them and then return back to the table and download the data or save your filter or save your lists. So finally, you can filter by source. Say you really just want to know what's in the database by, say, a particular author or from a publication, or, and we also, because the way it's set in there, you can search by publisher. And so here I chose an author because that's a pretty normal thing for us to want to know. I chose Ted Fleming because I co-authored a paper with him, and he's also studied quite a bit about seed dispersal and pollination in the neotropics. And you can see there are 455 interactions associated, whether Ted was the first author, second author, fifth author of an article. We can find all of those interactions. So, and again, we could look at this on a map, and we could, and then you can see listed below all the different, the titles of all the different papers or books that these interactions were taken from. So here's my pitch, is to please join us, join our tribe. You can participate. If you go to the participation tab, you can sign up. And again, we're not going to spam you. We don't give this information out. It is so you can save all of your settings over time. And then we will periodically, we might email you some updates about what new thing we've done. It also, you can provide us feedback. And the other great thing that we have borrowed from the batnames.org website is a way to submit a publication. We do not, we're at the tip of the iceberg of what we have in here right now. And you can see on the right, we have a running list of things we'd like to add that we update periodically. But please send us your PDFs. My goal is, and we're still building out the interface for this, is to have users, not just users of the database, but editors, people that are adding data to the database all over the place, adding data. And what we're building out right now is a review panel to make sure all the data has been put in correctly, the GPS actually goes to the location that it should, and have that whole process in place so that you know the data that you get out of the database has been reviewed and is not just random information put in that's not reliable. So we're still building that out. But in the meantime, we would love for you to submit your publications to us. And we have a team of a few folks that are slowly but surely diligently adding the data and figuring out where all the problems are with our user interface for adding data. And then ultimately, we'll have this user interface for reviewing the data. And then my dream would be also to have experts, say, experts from different taxa that the bats are interacting with, say with birds or with arthropods, to come in and help us correct for synonymy, correct names, update things over time. So we have different ways for folks to edit and work on this database. So anyway, this would not happen without the actual forethought of my PhD advisor, Scott Morey at the New York Botanical Garden, for hosting the original database and then bequeathing it to me when he was sort of washed his hands of that work and let me take this on and keep growing it. He's really excited that it continues to grow since he started in 2002. And then I've gotten support from Bat Conservation International, just mainly emotional support and encouragement that this is an interesting thing that would be helpful. And then to my current team, Kelly Garcia is our administrator right now. She kind of oversees it all. She also enters data. And then Shonda Bennett has been one of the great adders of data. She's the one taking on Europe right now to look at that. Sarah Younger and Taylor Brown are the great minds behind the UI and the actual building out of the back end of the database and manage all of the technical part. CE Nuevo Diego is in the Philippines, and she's been adding some data there. And then Tuli Defex had worked with us to move us from the plant database over into expanding out into different things, and was the project manager back, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. And then a thank you to all the researchers who have published data about bat eco interactions. And I hope you continue. It's such an interesting field of how organisms are interacting, and then learning different ways, particularly say in this pandemic, the importance of having this data at our fingertips to answer people's questions about the usefulness of bats to humans, which I'm sure many people are asking, given that there's a likelihood that this novel coronavirus emerged potentially from a bat host. So it's good to have it out there. And then this is a short presentation, again, more of a tutorial, and I'm happy to take questions. You see at the bottom is my contact information. You can shoot me an email, say you find right now we don't have an ability to provide all the publications online. For copyright reasons, we can't just put all the PDFs up online, but if you are looking for a particular thing and cannot find it, I have most of them digitally. There's some obscure text that I don't actually have digitally, but I can send them to you, or if you have ideas. So please let me know, and I'm happy to answer questions and go through stuff or go through the database. I can pull it up on my computer and we could do some searches together. So I'm happy to do that. And Rachel, let me know if you think we should move on to questions here, and how to take questions.
Excellent. So yeah, please do keep those questions rolling in. If anybody would prefer to ask their question, feel free to do that. You can just put up your hand, and we can then call out your name and you can unmute. Just to get started, we had actually, and very nicely said, as Cecilia mentioned, thank you very much for this presentation. She hadn't heard of this before, and she's really looking forward to looking through it in more detail. It's a very, very useful resource. And I think a lot of people here, but also myself included, I hadn't heard about this until about a couple of months ago when we were discussing it. And I think it is a really fantastic resource and something we can certainly build on. Also, as we'd mentioned, also about Globy. So there was a talk about iNaturalist AfriBats system, and actually the speaker on there gave spoke to us a little bit about Globy. So if anybody is interested in Globy as well, we can you go and have a look at that webinar. But it's actually fantastic that this information is then being uploaded. So one thing that made it quite exciting with this database is also the potential of looking at seasonal change in kind of dietary change over time as well, potentially. So I just wondered if there is it kind of more sort of how best people use this to kind of look at seasonality kind of changes in food.
And that's a great question. We did not include time frame in there, and that is something because some studies didn't actually provide the information of when the actual interaction. It was difficult to tell in most publications when the interaction was observed. Sometimes they say wet season, sometimes they say dry season. They would give a host of months, but we were not able. That became really difficult. And I would say what you might want to do would be to run a search and the location, and then try to dig into those individual publications. But we did look at that, and it's a great point that what the bats are doing throughout the year changes on almost a week, in some cases almost a weekly basis.
I mean, that's great. I mean, such a fantastic resource to have that information. And Hermione, who's based actually in Brazil, he was very excited about super cool information about the bryophyte dispersal by bats. So that's actually also I'm sure something that a lot of us haven't known. And I think a lot of the sort of information you've given are, you know, kind of cases where a lot of times we don't actually necessarily know a lot of these sort of interactions. And then Bruce has said fungal studies should also include fungi that are specific to and grow only in bat flies, a three trophic level interaction.
That is so interesting. Yes, yes. And so we would find a way. The other idea is we'd love to, the back end of this database is available for anyone to grab and I'm not technical, that's where I have this other part of my team, to grab it, and we could have a whole bat fly database and all the interactions between bat flies. So yeah, let's start, please send us those publications and we'll see how we can get that together. So we have like you said, this sort of layering effect of the interactions.
Thank you. And then Hirathan has said he's curious how external tree roosting species are grouped in the database. He said, I feel that flying fox roosts, for instance, can't be grouped as wood-bat interactions. In that case, would it be the difference between sort of tent roost versus an open roost, for instance, with flying foxes, and a tree cavity roost? Are these interactions considered while grouping bat roosting in the database?
Well, the great thing, the good and the bad of this, is we're just beginning to add this stuff. That type of interaction has not been, we have the ability to put it in, and there are very few of those that have been put in. So if there's a group of folks that wants to think through that and what would be most useful, that's not an area of my study. So we are open. If you would like and say, well, these are the different sections and the way this would be useful for us to look at it, let me know and help us build it out that would be most useful to you. We have very little data of that in the database right now. And let's build it out that makes the most sense for people that actually study roosting ecology. So please get in touch. We don't have much data there, and we can go any such way you would like with that.
Yeah, and I've put Cullen's email address in the chat, so please do swipe that now and keep in touch. We'll also put information about this and also the website onto. So this talk is going to be on our YouTube channel as well. So please do share this with other people and also share the website information with other people, because I think a lot of researchers are going to be very excited about this. Also, just going back when you had mentioned, Cullen, about obviously there's a lot of data, in universities, for instance, and certainly I know with like the Department of National Parks and Wildlife authorities, they often have reports on research that might not necessarily always be published. Would you also be interested in those kind of reports and that information?
Yeah, as long as someone has. Well, we were trying to avoid people just giving us their random field notes about seeing that, sort of more. We're trying to avoid the personal communication, adding just personal communication type data that hasn't been published. But yeah, field reports from agencies, we'd love to put that in. That we feel like that's a vetted document and vetted interaction.
Great. And then we have a question from Marnie saying, this project looks like it took a lot of work, and how are you funded?
We are funded by me right now. This is on an absolute shoestring. We don't have a grant, which has allowed us to, it's made this very slow going, but it's been interesting. It's both frustrating and wonderful at the same time. We've learned a lot about what we're doing because we have to go so slow, and we find our mistakes pretty quickly and then as we build out, we can interact more with the community to find out what they want. Again, then we want this to be a community-owned project and not owned by me or one group. That hopefully this is going to just be owned by the bat. Obviously you need some folks that are going to feel some ownership, but owned by the community at large. And so that's our funding. We don't have a real funding source besides me right now.
Thank you. And it's nice to know that also hopefully from this we can a lot of people who might be able to volunteer a bit of their time to kind of help this project grow, and we'll all, you know, benefit from that. I guess I know that you're, you know, starting to look at different areas, but do you feel that there's specific gaps that need filling, you know, research opportunities for people thinking about maybe doing sort of you know, ecosystem services or eco interaction research?
I feel like we still have so much that we need to learn. And the idea here is to hopefully capture, we already, you know, what we know a lot about. We know a lot about neotropical bats that disperse pioneer plants. We know a lot about that. That's been studied in depth. But what we don't know are a lot, and it's more difficult to study, is say bats that move what we call stomatoporously move the seeds around, meaning that in the mouth of the bat is a large seeded fruit, like stuff like that. We don't know. We would need more study. There's this whole idea of the other interactions that bats have with other organisms, whether they're sort of novel interactions, again, with brought up about roosting of bats. Like there was the great, and I'm not sure if it's in our database yet, the bat roosting in pitcher plants and that kind of dynamic, you know, learning more about that. And then targeting different species, again, targeting, say, the rhinolophus that have been a focus of this current pandemic. What do we know about them ecologically? And again, that's not a part of the world I work in, but what do we know, and what are they interacting with, and what, you know, they're obviously providing a number of different ecological services and benefits. What are those things? What other organisms rely on those bats? So I think there's a huge number of different ways to go about this. And what's exciting is the technology as far as using DNA in order to identify the insects in bat guano, and to use as also the same with fruit and guano there. And we're just beginning to really be able to layer this together. So I feel like there's a lot of different ideas. And then there's huge parts of the world that are just totally understudied. We barely even know, I mean, we have a general idea what bats are there. We don't know what they're doing throughout the year. And we definitely don't have a lot of information about what other organisms they're interacting with.
Thank you. And I noticed on one of your maps, you had the sort of, when you were looking at all the interactions, you had interaction density being kind of light, medium, and heavy. And is that related to the number of species, or the interaction?
That's the number of interactions, and that is by, again, the person working on the back end with the information, and just trying to show somewhat. It's not particularly informative. It just shows, oh wow, there are a lot. You know, here's a way to look at those that are in green just have a few interactions at that location, and those that you know, there's some publications that have a huge number of interactions in one particular location. And here in the New World, Barrio Colorado Island has so many interactions. It comes up very bright on as far as, you know, that's a location that we know a lot about the bats and their interactions with, particularly with plants there, and now more so with some other say with interactions with vertebrates. But that's all that is. It was just the woman making a coating to try to show, give it a little more depth on the map.
Well, it's a nice way of, so we've had this with the sort of AfriBats project, where we try and actually use it as a way to challenge others. So, you know, now we're saying now in Africa we have over 1,063 interactions. Hopefully we can start to increase that.
Probably we're missing papers. Again, in many cases, these are just an initial sweep of the literature that my team has done and looked at and just started adding data.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good way of actually visualizing it to hopefully get people a little bit more competitive and in there and send you info so we can increase our numbers. That's what we've been trying to do on the African perspective, because so certainly for biological records for Africa, 90% of all biological data comes from South Africa, which obviously makes me quite proud. But I'm just you know, we use that to try and actually say to people, well, obviously, you know, rest of Africa kind of has an incredible amount of data that just hasn't been mobilized yet. So hopefully we can try and actually put some information out to try and I'm sure people in the different regions you were also mentioning about will also be taking that. So we have people from Europe, from Asia, from Latin America. So hopefully we can start a bit of a competition going, see how many we can add to. And then for those of you who aren't aware, so Nancy Simmons heads up names.org, which is a fantastic resource, and Helen had mentioned that earlier on in her talk. So just Bruce had mentioned ensuring sort of obviously working with the linkages at names.org to there's the ever-present obviously problem of scientifically updating the taxonomy. So for instance, Hippocidrus commersoni is now known, then changed to be kind of, you know, Hippocidrus vittatus and Hippocidrus gas, and is now changed to be Macronectrus. So he's actually saying obviously there'll be an opportunity to work with that.
There's a huge opportunity, and I was trying to do it myself and trying to keep up with it. And what we need to do is periodically go through and update and manage for the synonymy and update the name, and hoping to work with experts in that field so they can go through. And what I imagine is, what the part that you didn't see in the database is the editors having having a particular group of editors that are bat systematists that can periodically go in and they can change all that themselves without even, you know, and then we'll see those changes, and there'll be a note who made the change and when the change was made, and all that information is on the back end too, so that we can be making those changes, whether it's again with bats, plants, arthropods, whatever. Those names are constantly changing, and it's very frustrating when you go and try to do a search and you get papers from the 1970s and has one different bat name, and then you want everything from that species, but it has a new name from the papers in the 90s. And so a way to keep that current is the other concept. So yeah, so we're going to be reaching out for other folks to come in and start editing this information.
Yeah, and I guess as you mentioned also, I suppose with the plant and also then the arthropods are probably, some of the updates to that will probably make our the back side of things look a bit easier probably. Yeah. I'm sure they have a huge job too, right?
Yeah.
And then Hanani was just saying a total of at least 549 species from 190 genera, 62 families dispersed by bats in the neotropic. 147 theropodid bats are known to eat fruit from at least 139 genera in 58 families, and this is from Coons 2011. Do you know how this is representativeness of the species on this database? Hanani, maybe I don't know if you want to unmute.
We have all the individual papers from which Tom and his team had gathered that information. And so that should all be in there, the individual numbers. And the neotropic stuff about seed dispersal, the book from 2009, has all that and probably more information. And the old world, we're trying to get there. Again, that's because the original focus was the new world. So we're still looking, but the individual publications should be in there. We're trying, and you'll see there's another thing I didn't talk about was secondary citations. So before we were including sort of anything, and say in the introduction, someone cited somebody else saying bat eat piper or something, and that had originally been in there. We're trying to keep the secondary citations to things where that we can include, but if we can go back to the original and find that original publication, that's the thing that we want in our database, so it doesn't get repeated multiple times, the exact same interaction. Yeah, and we have a whole list of caveats there too. So just because something says there's a bat, say there's, you know, if you go and search and there's certain, say with ficus, there's probably more Moraceae, the plant family, and ficus, there's probably more interactions between bats and ficus than in the database than probably anything else, maybe Piper. But we want to, the caveat is that just because there's a bunch of interactions listed from a bunch of different publications doesn't necessarily mean that the ecological interaction between ficus and that particular bat species is stronger than another one. We're not able to show the strength based on the data in the database. You can't show the strength of the relationship between the two organisms because they're reported multiple times. You have to be aware, because in certain habitats it's not strong. So you have to, there are caveats about the generalization that we've listed there. How you can generalize the data, that doesn't really work.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting, like you're saying, if you can search actually on the species, because you can also then presumably, you know, kind of tease out, you know, species that are potentially more, you know, kind of you know, niche restricted or kind of, you know, specific to, you know, only a certain number. So I know that Botanical Garden Conservation International were working in Malawi and on Mulanje kind of plateau, and they were saying that there's actually a tree there that is now having to be hand pollinated, and they are pretty sure that it was actually bat pollinated. And so, you know, that would be, it's quite interesting from a, also like your, you know, kind of conservation sort of management and conservation action plans, is actually looking at species that maybe are more restricted in their food source. Would be, this would be a great resource, you know, to help inform some of that as well. And so Hernani had to, really cool, thank you very much. And Marnie has said, given the current COVID-19 epidemic, have you received any papers on pangolin and bats?
No, we have not, and that would be really interesting. I'm not aware of any interactions between pangolins and bats. But again, that would be, again, we're just barely scratching the surface of all this information to go out and find out, where are they cohabitating somewhere? Are they, you know, where are they interacting? Do they interact? Or is it just happens to be that the virus, you know, happen to be in the same cell, two different viruses in the same cell of one of these organisms at one time? And it's really pretty amazing. And we have so much more to learn. And hopefully this will help as we have more and more data, and it can really point to new areas where we need more information about bats and their interactions.
Yeah, definitely. And certainly, so actually last week we had a talk by Helen Taylor Boyd. And she's doing her PhD on bats in an agricultural landscape in Zambia. So I'm sure she would be, she's just, as you mentioned, now with molecular techniques, she's going to be doing dietary analysis there. So that information will then be available. And also we've got researchers from South Africa as well, talking about sort of bats and on macadamian orchards, so looking at ecosystem services there. And there's certainly been an increase in kind of ecosystem service research. So hopefully there'll be quite a lot of information coming soon. So I think we've come to the end of our questions, but if anybody has any more, we've still got a few more minutes if you want to add that, or if you prefer to raise your hand and ask Cullen directly. But in the meanwhile, I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to add or talk about.
And again, feel free to shoot me an email. There's a huge amount that still we have to build out. And if you have a particular area of research, like the folks that were talking about roosting ecology, let's build it out in a way that makes most sense for roosting ecology, which is different than, you know, where this came from what bats are eating. And let's build it out so it makes the most sense for you guys. And and same with interactions with other mammals, interactions with bacteria, all sorts of different things, the other types of data that we need to be capturing. So again, this is meant for everybody to be able to use and it to be useful for everyone.
Thank you very much. And then Marnie has said, thank you very much. This is a really great idea, hard work, and has so much potential. And I think that's definitely the impression. We've got some lots of nice messages for Cullen that I'll be sure to send on to you. And so we've And we're also going to be looking at doing some training courses coming up. And one of the areas that we're interested in doing is kind of looking at different survey methods. So Cullen has very kindly offered to also come and give another talk again, but also she might be able to kind of help with sort of giving us insights into best practice in this kind of research area as well. So let us know if you're interested in that sort of thing. And oh, here we've got a paper on pangolins and bats living together in Gabon.
Oh, that's fantastic! Oh, amazing. Okay, we need to see that. Yes, thank you for that.
So Pirathon has sent that in, and I'll be sure I'll send this on to you. And so if people could get in touch with Cullen, and we'll have Cullen's email address and the website on the webinar as well, or get in touch with me. But I have put it in the chat, and it was on the presentation. So yeah, please do get in touch and hopefully add to this fantastic database. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Cullen, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. Bye.
Bye.